Crystal chandeliers shimmered above a sea of designer gowns and bespoke suits, their hushed conversations punctuated by the clinking of champagne flutes. The Sterling mansion, a monument to old money and unyielding prestige, thrummed with the low hum of privilege. Tonight, it was an art gala, another excuse for the city's elite to congregate, network, and subtly flaunt their inherited fortunes. A young woman, barely visible amidst the towering figures and glittering displays, navigated the periphery with a tray of perfectly arranged canapes, her eyes downcast but her senses acutely aware of the extravagant world swirling around her. She was Lena, or rather, the daughter of Mrs. Petrova, the Sterling family's long-serving and indispensable maid. A knot of nervous anticipation tightened in Lena's stomach, not for the party itself, but for the life beyond these gilded walls, a life that felt 1,000,000 miles away, yet was inextricably linked. And then, a booming, arrogant laugh cut through the genteel murmur, followed by words that would unknowingly ignite a spark that night. Before we dive deeper into Lena's extraordinary journey, please consider subscribing to our channel. Your support helps us bring more compelling and inspiring stories like this one to light. Don't miss out on what happens next. Lena lived with her ailing mother in a small, cramped apartment miles away from the Sterling estate. A stark contrast to the sprawling luxury she served. Her mother, Mrs. Petrova, despite her worsening health, worked tirelessly, her hands chapped from years of cleaning and polishing the endless surfaces of the Sterling mansion, ensuring every silver tray gleamed, every floor shone. Lena was a gifted piano prodigy, her fingers capable of coaxing profound emotions from even the most battered instruments. She had taught herself complex pieces, often on an old, out-of-tune upright piano crammed into the corner of their tiny living room, its yellowed keys often sticking, its pedals creaking a dissonant protest. Her dream, a scholarship to a prestigious music conservatory, felt like a distant, unreachable star, a cruel taunt from a world she could only glimpse through the mansion's polished windows. Every note she played was a prayer, a desperate hope for a better future, for a way to ease her mother's suffering. The Sterling estate itself was a character, a vast, ornate behemoth of a home, its grandeur almost suffocating. Marble statues stood sentinel in manicured gardens, fountains whispered secrets into the night, and inside, priceless artworks adorned every wall. Yet, beneath the veneer of perfect order and flawless taste lay a palpable chill, a distant family dynamic where wealth had replaced warmth and ambition overshadowed affection. The air in the mansion often felt heavy, not with history but with unspoken expectations and the weight of superficiality. Lena, moving silently through its halls, felt this coldness acutely, despite the occasional kind word from Mrs. Sterling, a woman whose own melancholic eyes often held a spark of something forgotten. The initial conflict in Lena's quiet struggle deepened with her mother's health. What had started as persistent coughs turned into chronic fatigue and breathing difficulties. The doctor's bills mounted, and the family's already strained finances buckled under the pressure. Lena watched her mother, her once vibrant spirit slowly dimming, and felt a desperate urgency building within her. One afternoon, while visiting the community center, a flyer caught her eye. National Young Artists Scholarship Competition, grand prize full tuition and living stipend. Her heart leaped with a familiar, dangerous hope. Then she saw the entry fee, a sum that might as well have been a king's ransom, and the requirement for a professional-grade audition recording, a cruel reminder of her old, out-of-tune piano and their lack of resources. The dream, once again, seemed to recede, leaving her with a familiar ache of helplessness. Enter Richard Sterling Jr., the scion of the Sterling dynasty. He was a creature of privilege, a man-child constantly surrounded by an entourage of sycophants, his days a blur of lavish parties, expensive toys, and an almost pathological disdain for anyone who wasn't born into his gilded cage. Tonight, at the art gala, fueled by an endless supply of Veuve Clicquot and the fawning admiration of his circle, Richard Jr. was particularly boisterous. He moved through the crowd like a king surveying his subjects, his laughter echoing a little too loudly, his voice carrying a little too far. The spark of the main challenge ignited innocently enough. Lena's mother, momentarily away from her duties, was speaking quietly with another maid in a secluded hallway, unaware of Richard Jr.'s proximity. "My Lena," she murmured, a rare note of pride in her tired voice. "She plays the piano like an angel. If only she had a proper instrument. If only she could afford proper lessons." Richard Jr., passing by with a half-empty champagne flute, caught the tail end of the conversation. His eyes, already glazed with alcohol, flickered with amusement and disdain. He paused, turning to the two maids with a condescending smirk. "Oh, the maid's daughter plays piano, does she?" he drawled, his voice loud enough to turn heads. He chuckled, a harsh, dismissive sound. "Tell you what," he continued, holding up his glass as if making a toast to his own absurdity. "If she can play Chopin's revolutionary etude and actually impress me, I'll give her $1 million. He paused, letting the outrageous sum hang in the air, then added with a sneer, "But she won't, of course. A maid's daughter playing Chopin? Please, it's an impossible feat. Don't waste my time." He laughed again, louder this time, before sauntering off, leaving Lena's mother mortified, and Lena, who had been an unseen witness from behind a towering floral arrangement, with a cold, burning ember of anger and a flicker of something else, something dangerous, in her heart. The challenge, tossed out like a discarded napkin, was meant to be an insult, a dismissal, but to Lena, it landed with the weight of a twisted, impossible opportunity. Lena learned of Richard Jr.'s outrageous challenge not directly from him, but through her mother, whose face was a canvas of conflicting emotions. Embarrassment warred with a fragile, almost desperate hope, a visual representation of their precarious existence. Her mother relayed the encounter with a hushed tone, recounting Richard Jr.'s dismissive sneer and the flippant way he had tossed out the $1 million dare. Lena felt a hot flush creep up her neck. It wasn't just the absurdity of the amount, but the sheer condescension implicit in his words. A maid's daughter playing Chopin. Impossible. The insult ran deeper than just her, extending to her mother, to their entire struggle. Lena initially dismissed it outright, her pride wounded, feeling a surge of anger at the arrogance of someone who could so casually belittle her passion, her very being. How dare he turn her art, her sanctuary, into a crude spectacle? But as the days bled into one another, Lena found herself wrestling with an internal torment that chipped away at her indignation. The scholarship competition, once her shining beacon, now felt like a distant, flickering candle. The entry fee, the lack of a proper instrument, the sheer competitive nature of it all, it seemed an ever-increasing mountain to climb. Meanwhile, the shadow of her mother's worsening health loomed larger, casting a pall over their small apartment. The coughs grew more frequent, the fatigue more pronounced, and the medical bills, though unspoken, weighed heavily in the silence between them. Richard's challenge, grotesque and insulting as it was, began to morph in her mind from a sneering taunt into a twisted last-ditch opportunity. $1 million. The sum was astronomical, unfathomable, but it represented more than just wealth. It represented doctors, medicine, a life free from the gnawing anxiety of poverty. It was the key to her mother's future, a future Lena was desperate to secure. Her pride was a luxury she simply could not afford. With a heavy heart and a renewed, steely resolve, Lena began her clandestine training. The specified piece was Chopin's revolutionary etude, Op. 10, number 12, a notoriously difficult and emotionally charged composition. She couldn't afford new sheet music, so she painstakingly copied borrowed pages from a kind elderly music teacher who occasionally volunteered at the local community center. Late into the nights, long after her mother had fallen into a fitful sleep, Lena would steal away to the center. There, in a dusty, dimly lit room, sat an old, upright piano. Its keys were yellowed, some chipped, and the tone was a little flat in places. But it was a piano nonetheless. She practiced with a ferocity born of desperation, her fingers flying over the unyielding keys, each note a prayer, a protest, a promise. She listened to old vinyl recordings, memorizing nuances, breathing patterns, the very soul of the music, internalizing every crescendo and diminuendo. The old piano became her battleground, its imperfections her constant challenge, honing her touch, her precision, her endurance. The pressure mounted not just from within, but from the world outside their tiny existence. Her mother's condition, tragically, continued its downward spiral. The doctor's words grew graver with each visit. The subtle shifts in her mother's complexion, the increasing weakness in her voice, all screaming urgency. Adding to this unbearable weight was the insidious spread of the challenge. News of Richard Jr.'s drunken boast, embellished and distorted with each retelling, began to ripple through the Sterling household staff. It reached their social circle, turning Lena into a whispered curiosity, an object of pity or amusement. The immense, invisible pressure of all those eyes, those judgments, settled on her shoulders, threatening to buckle her determination. She wasn't just playing for her mother anymore. She was playing against the sneers of a privileged world, against their low expectations. Then, a flicker of an unexpected alliance appeared in the most unlikely of places. Mrs. Sterling, Richard Jr.'s mother, a woman usually encased in an aura of detached elegance, somehow caught wind of the challenge and, more importantly, of Lena's hidden talent. Perhaps it was a chance remark from a discreet servant, or a glimpse of Lena herself at the community center. But the information reached her. It was said that Mrs. Sterling, in her younger days, harbored a quiet, unfulfilled passion for classical music, a dream largely sacrificed at the altar of her husband's business empire and the demands of high society. Seeing Lena, a young girl with raw, untempered talent, ignited something dormant within her. She recognized the genuine artistic spirit, the fervent dedication, a reflection of her own forgotten aspirations. One evening, as Lena was leaving the community center after another exhausting practice session, she received a coded, almost clandestine message. It was from Mrs. Sterling, relayed through her mother. The instruction was clear. At 7 o'clock, go to the second back entrance near the old rose garden. Do not be seen. Lena, confused but desperate, followed the instructions. There, in the dim light of the evening, Mrs. Sterling, her face uncharacteristically soft, met her. Without preamble, she led Lena through a labyrinth of forgotten corridors to a seldom-used wing of the mansion. Inside, bathed in the moonlight filtering through a tall window, sat a gleaming grand piano. It wasn't the concert-grade behemoth in the main ballroom, but was still leagues beyond the community center's battered upright. "You may use this," Mrs. Sterling whispered, her voice low and conspiratorial, "but only when my son is not present, and under the absolute condition of secrecy. He must never know." Lena's heart swelled with a mixture of gratitude and renewed hope. The sound of real ivory beneath her fingers, the rich, resonant tones that filled the quiet room, was a revelation. It was a lifeline, a secret weapon in her desperate, solitary battle, and a silent testament to the unexpected kindness of an ally in the heart of the enemy's territory. This was her chance, however improbable, however humiliating the circumstances, to play not just for her mother, but for every suppressed dream, every unheard melody, every quiet dignity that dared to defy expectation. The news of the impending performance spread through Richard Jr.'s tight-knit circle like wildfire, a juicy morsel of entertainment for their jaded palates. What began as a drunken offhand declaration now transformed into a full-blown spectacle, largely at the insistence of his friends who relished the idea of watching a maid's daughter attempt to impress their notoriously demanding associate. They egged him on, their voices dripping with amusement, until Richard Jr. felt compelled to formalize the event. A specific date was set, a private gathering at the mansion designed to showcase Lena's presumed failure, turning it into a morbidly entertaining wager among his idle companions. He even went so far as to arrange for the grandest piano in the Sterling residence, a magnificent Steinway, to be moved to the main ballroom, an act of performative generosity that only underscored his condescension. Lena, meanwhile, felt the immense weight of these escalating expectations and the palpable skepticism emanating from every corner. The pressure was a constant companion, a heavy cloak she couldn't shed. Every note she played was not just for herself, or even for her ailing mother, but for the principle of proving her worth and dignity in a world that sought to deny it. Her fingers, once dancing freely across the keys in pure joy, now moved with a fierce determination, each chord a rebellion, each melody a testament to her unyielding spirit. This was no longer just about the money, vital as it was for her mother's care. It was about reclaiming her identity through her music, intertwining her deep-seated passion with her fight for her family's survival and respect. The Chopin Etude, notoriously demanding, became her battlefield, her sanctuary, and her voice. Richard Jr.'s arrogance, far from diminishing, seemed to swell with each passing day. He viewed the upcoming performance as a guaranteed victory, a public humiliation he eagerly anticipated. He envisioned Lena faltering, her talent exposed as a flimsy facade, allowing him to deliver a cutting lesson in knowing her place. His elaborate planning, the specific date, the carefully curated guest list of cynical friends and influential figures, all served to amplify his certainty in an outcome where he would emerge triumphant. His misguided perception of superiority reinforced. He imagined the smirks, the knowing glances, the affirmation of his belief that class distinctions were inherent and immutable. Amidst this suffocating atmosphere of disdain, Mrs. Sterling's quiet encouragement became an unexpected, precious lifeline. She observed Lena's relentless dedication, the hours spent hunched over the piano in the seldom-used room, the quiet intensity in her eyes. It resonated with a forgotten part of herself, a passion for artistry that had long been buried under layers of societal expectation and a distant, transactional marriage. Mrs. Sterling would often appear, seemingly by chance, offering subtle tips on managing performance anxiety, sharing insights garnered from her own youth as an aspiring musician, a secret history she rarely spoke of. A special herbal tea blend, prepared with a quiet thoughtfulness, would appear in Lena's practice room on the day before the performance, a small but significant gesture of solidarity, a silent acknowledgement of the unspoken connection between them. It was a warmth Lena hadn't anticipated, a genuine act of kindness that transcended the chasm of their social standing. As the day of the performance loomed closer, the tension in Lena's small apartment was almost unbearable. The night before, a profound quiet settled over their humble living space. Lena's mother, her face pale and drawn, reached out a trembling hand and gently clasped Lena's. Her voice, though weak, was imbued with an unwavering strength. "Lena, my darling," she whispered, her eyes filled with an unshed tenderness. "Play from your heart. Always play from your heart. The money, yes, it's important, but your music, your spirit, that's what truly matters. No matter what happens tomorrow, I am so incredibly proud of you. Don't play for them. Play for yourself. Play for the music. Play for us." Her mother's words were a balm to Lena's frayed nerves, an anchor in the turbulent sea of doubt and apprehension. They reminded her why she had embarked on this challenging path in the first place. It wasn't just about winning a bet or gaining a financial reward. It was about honoring her talent, preserving her dignity, and expressing the very essence of her being through the language she knew best: music. The Chopin Etude, with its intricate melodies and powerful emotions, was no longer just a piece of music. It was a conduit for her soul, a narrative of her struggles and her hopes. She spent the rest of the evening not in frantic practice, but in silent contemplation, allowing her mother's words to settle deep within her, transforming her fear into a resolute calm. The mansion, the arrogant gaze of Richard Jr., the skeptical faces of his friends, all faded into the background. All that remained was the music, waiting to be unleashed. The day of the performance dawned with an unsettling stillness, an almost unnatural calm that belied the storm brewing within the opulent Sterling mansion. From the early hours, the grand foyer and main hall buzzed with a low thrum of anticipation, an undercurrent of hushed whispers and polished silver clinking. Richard Jr. had meticulously orchestrated his audience, not merely inviting but summoning his most cynical friends, those who delighted in the downfall of others, along with a carefully curated selection of influential figures from the local arts scene. His intention was clear: to ensure maximum witness to Lena's spectacular failure, a public humiliation designed to reinforce his twisted perception of social order. The air itself felt thick, heavy with expectation, and that thinly veiled condescension which permeated every corner of the Sterling world. Each arriving guest carried an unspoken verdict, their expressions ranging from casual disinterest to outright amusement at the impending spectacle. Lena arrived precisely on time, stepping from the back entrance where her mother's usual duties typically brought her, directly into the glaring spotlight of the grand hall. She was dressed simply, in a dark, understated dress that was clean and pressed but utterly devoid of the shimmering extravagance that adorned every other woman in the room. The contrast was stark, almost jarring. Her heart thumped a frantic rhythm against her ribs as she felt the full, collective weight of their gazes descend upon her. Each pair of eyes seemed to dissect her, measuring her perceived audacity, questioning her right to even occupy the same space. Her hands, usually so steady at the keyboard, felt clammy, a cold sweat pricking her palms. Yet beneath the surface flutter, her resolve remained firm, an unwavering core of steel. She moved with a quiet dignity, her chin held high, towards the imposing grand piano that stood like a silent sentinel in the center of the room. Richard Jr., ever the showman of his own self-importance, was waiting, He leaned against the piano, a champagne flute casually in hand, a smirk playing on his lips. As Lena approached, he pushed himself upright, his eyes raking over her simple attire with a calculated disdain. "Well, well, if it isn't our little virtuoso," he drawled, his voice carrying just enough to be heard over the polite murmur of the room. "Ready to entertain us, are we? Don't tell me you actually think you can pull this off." His words were a deliberate taunt, a barb intended to rattle her, to undermine her confidence before her fingers even touched the keys. Lena paused, her gaze meeting his without flinching. Her eyes, though wide with a natural apprehension, held a quiet determination, a depth that momentarily seemed to strip away his practiced bravado. She offered no verbal response, simply a steady look that acknowledged his challenge without accepting his scorn. Then, with a graceful, unhurried movement, she settled onto the piano bench. Her heart continued its wild drumming, a frantic accompaniment to the silence that now enveloped the room. Taking a deep, steadying breath, Lena lifted her hands. Her first few notes were indeed tentative, a delicate touch on the keys that reflected the tremor in her soul. The sound was soft, almost hesitant, a cautious exploration of the melody. A few guests exchanged knowing glances, a subtle confirmation of their prior judgment. Richard Jr. allowed himself a fleeting, smug smile. But then something shifted. As her fingers glided across the ivory, a subtle transformation began. Lena closed her eyes for a fleeting moment, allowing the music to envelop her, to become her sole focus. The external world, its judgments and expectations, began to recede. She found her rhythm, the hesitant notes growing in confidence, intertwining into the complex tapestry of the difficult Chopin etude. The music swelled, filling the cavernous hall, no longer a meek offering, but a powerful declaration. It was then that the first palpable shift occurred in the meticulously assembled audience. Heads that had been turned in casual conversation now swiveled towards the piano. Faces that had worn expressions of bored amusement began to lose their cynical edges. Lena's playing transcended mere technical proficiency. It held an emotional depth, a raw, unvarnished passion that began to captivate the room, silencing the whispers, stilling the fidgeting. The cynical smiles that had initially graced the faces of Richard Jr.'s friends slowly, imperceptibly, faded. Their expressions morphed into something akin to surprise, then grudging admiration. They exchanged bewildered glances, their earlier bets and jests momentarily forgotten as the sheer artistry of the music began to wash over them. Even Richard Sterling Sr., the patriarch, a man usually ensconced in the digital world of his tablet, his attention perpetually fractured, slowly looked up, his brow furrowed not in annoyance, but in a faint curiosity, then a dawning recognition. In a quiet corner, Mrs. Sterling watched, her heart a tumultuous mix of pride and apprehension. As Lena's fingers danced across the keys, coaxing forth each intricate phrase and soaring melody, a single tear traced a path down Mrs. Sterling's cheek. She wasn't merely hearing notes. She was feeling the genuine artistry, the profound emotion that Lena poured into every single chord. It was a purity of expression that reminded her of a long-lost dream, a forgotten passion that Lena's music was now bringing back to life within her. The elegance, the strength, the sheer, undeniable talent emanating from the young woman at the piano resonated deeply within her own quiet, often unacknowledged artistic soul. She watched, completely spellbound, as Lena continued to weave her magic, her tears a silent testament to the power of the music and the young woman who dared to defy all expectations. The atmosphere in the room had utterly shifted. The condescension had evaporated, replaced by an awestruck silence, a collective breath held captive by the spell of Chopin. Lena's fingers, having navigated the initial anxieties and tentative opening phrases, now moved with an almost supernatural precision across the keys. The Chopin etude, a formidable challenge even for seasoned professionals, unfolded effortlessly under her touch. She had reached the absolute climax of the piece, a section brimming with both dizzying technical demands and profound emotional depth. Every fiber of her being was concentrated on the music, her vision narrowing to the ebony and ivory, her hearing attuned only to the rich, cascading harmonies and the intricate melodic lines. The sheer power emanating from the grand piano, a mere instrument, yet now transformed into an extension of her will, filled the opulent hall. The sound swelled, a tempest of notes, a furious yet beautiful storm unleashed. Her movements were fluid, her body swaying almost imperceptibly with the rhythm. Her face a canvas reflecting the intense passion she poured into each individual note. Her earlier nervousness had completely dissipated, replaced by an absolute surrender to the music. It was no longer a performance. It was an act of raw, unfiltered creation, a testament to years of unseen practice, unheard sacrifices, and an unyielding love for the art form. The room, which moments before had buzzed with latent skepticism and polite disdain, fell into an absolute, breathless silence. Not a cough, not a whisper, not even the rustle of an expensive silk gown dared to break the spell she had cast. Every single person in that lavish drawing room, from the most jaded socialite to the most cynical of Richard Jr.'s friends, was utterly mesmerized. Richard Jr., who had begun the performance with a smug, anticipatory smirk, intending to revel in her inevitable failure, now found his jaw hanging slightly agape. His eyes, usually alight with condescension, were wide with genuine astonishment. The wine glass he held was forgotten, his grip loose, threatening to spill its contents. The arrogance that usually defined his every posture and expression had been momentarily, and perhaps permanently, displaced by a profound, disbelieving awe. He had never imagined such a sound could come from anyone, let alone the daughter of his family's maid. Lena poured every ounce of her life's narrative into the music, the struggle of her mother's illness, the gnawing anxiety of financial insecurity, the quiet dignity of their humble existence, the burning desire to prove her worth, the sheer, unadulterated joy of creation. All of it was transmuted into sound. Each arpeggio was a tear shed, each thunderous chord a defiant declaration, each tender melody a whispered hope. The music became a living, breathing entity, a narrative of her journey, touching the hearts of even the most jaded among the listeners. It was a language that transcended social barriers, speaking directly to the universal human experience of struggle, hope, and beauty. Even Richard Sterling Sr., the patriarch of the family, a man whose life revolved around cold pragmatism, ruthless business dealings, and an almost pathological detachment, found himself strangely, deeply moved. He had initially dismissed the entire spectacle as a childish stunt, a frivolous distraction from his demanding schedule. But as Lena played, a forgotten chord within him resonated. He found himself transported back to a time long past, a fleeting memory from his own youth when he harbored a hidden, unexpressed passion for classical music, before the relentless pursuit of wealth had calcified his soul. A wistful melancholy, a sensation he hadn't experienced in decades, flickered momentarily behind his steely gaze. He watched Lena, not as a maid's daughter, but as an artist, an undeniable force of nature, and a seed of something new began to stir within his often impenetrable heart. The climax reached its crescendo, a final breathtaking flurry of notes that left no doubt about the performer's absolute mastery. Lena's fingers danced across the keys in a final defiant flourish, a triumphant exclamation mark at the end of an extraordinary musical sentence. Then, with a delicate, almost ethereal touch, she played the last chord. The rich, resonant sound blossomed in the air, hanging suspended for a long, profound moment, vibrating with an almost tangible energy. It lingered, a ghost of its former power, before slowly, exquisitely, fading into an absolute, deafening silence. The quiet that followed was not merely the absence of sound. It was a silence born of reverence, a collective holding of breath, a recognition that something truly extraordinary had just transpired in their midst. The air crackled with unspoken emotions, a testament to the raw power of Lena's performance. The final chord of the Chopin etude hung in the air, a shimmering echo of profound emotion that resonated through every corner of the opulent ballroom. An almost unbearable silence descended, broken only by the frantic beat of Lena's own heart, pounding against her ribs like a trapped bird. Her fingers, still poised above the keys, felt a strange combination of numbness and exhilaration. She kept her gaze fixed on the polished ivory, afraid to look up, afraid to break the spell. The silence stretched, heavy with a mixture of awe and disbelief, each second feeling like an eternity. Then, from somewhere in the back, a single tentative clap broke the spell. It was followed quickly by another, then a smattering more, until a wave of applause, hesitant at first, swelled into a thunderous, resounding ovation. People rose from their seats, a collective intake of breath turning into an outpouring of genuine admiration. It was a crescendo of sound that washed over Lena, bringing with it an overwhelming flood of relief and unexpected tears. Her vision blurred, but she could vaguely make out the figures rising, their faces no longer contorted in cynical smirks or detached amusement, but marked by expressions of genuine wonder. Richard Jr. stood frozen, his jaw slack, the picture of utter defeat. The cocky grin he had worn all evening had vanished, replaced by an expression of pure astonishment, bordering on humiliation. For a long moment, he simply stared at Lena, his eyes wide, as if she were a ghost. He seemed to gather himself, forcing a semblance of composure, and began to walk towards the piano. Every step felt heavy, each movement betraying a deep-seated struggle. He approached Lena, his initial attempt at a forced, brittle smile quickly crumbling under the weight of his own stunned realization. I can't believe it," he stammered, his voice barely above a whisper, uncharacteristically devoid of its usual arrogant bite. You did it." There was an undeniable flicker of something new in his eyes, not just surprise, but a grudging, almost painful respect. He extended a hand, his touch surprisingly gentle. "Congratulations, Lena. You truly were incredible." It was an awkward acknowledgement, devoid of grace but undeniably sincere in its reluctant admiration. The challenge, his boast, his entire worldview built on privilege and dismissiveness, had been utterly shattered by the sheer power of her music. Before Lena could fully process Richard Jr.'s stunned concession, a more imposing figure stepped forward. Richard Sterling Sr., his face a mask of complex emotions, moved with an air of authority that commanded instant attention. The room quieted once more, shifting its focus to the patriarch. His gaze was stern, first directed at his son, then softening as it turned to Lena. "Richard, that was a thoughtless, reckless challenge," he he stated, his voice booming with a gravity that permitted no argument. To put such a burden on someone, to use talent as a trivial wager, is beneath us. His words were a public reprimand, a stinging indictment of his son's behavior, resonating through the hushed room. But then, his gaze returned to Lena, and a profound respect shone in his eyes. However, Lena, your courage, your dedication, and your undeniable artistry have transformed a foolish bet into something truly extraordinary. You have shown us all the power of true talent and dignity. He paused, letting his words sink in, then continued, his voice gaining a new, decisive tone. The $1 million which my son so carelessly offered will indeed be given, but not as a prize for a wager, he announced, his voice carrying conviction. It will be used to establish the Lena Sterling Scholarship Fund, a fund dedicated to supporting aspiring musicians from underprivileged backgrounds, ensuring that no genuine talent ever goes unheard for lack of opportunity. A ripple of murmurs, approving and surprised, spread through the room. Furthermore, Richard Sr. continued, turning to Lena, we will personally ensure your musical education. You will receive full sponsorship to any top-tier conservatory you choose, with all expenses covered. This is not charity, Lena. This is an investment in pure, unadulterated talent, and a testament to the profound impact you've had on every soul in this room tonight. Lena could only stand there, tears streaming uncontrollably down her face, her heart overflowing. It wasn't just the money or the scholarship or the validation, though all were immensely important. It was the complete, utter reversal of her fortunes, the unexpected triumph over such daunting odds. It was the recognition of years of tireless practice, of sacrifices made for a dream that had often felt impossible. It was the quiet dignity she had maintained, the fierce passion that had fueled her, the financial security for her mother, the path to a world-class education. It was all suddenly within reach. The cold arrogance of the Sterling mansion had given way to an unexpected, heartfelt generosity, forged in the crucible of her music. She was overwhelmed, not just by the prospect of a brighter future, but by the profound sense of justice and affirmation that flowed through her. Her music had not only silenced critics, it had opened doors she never dared to dream existed, transforming a callous challenge into a genuine opportunity for herself and countless others. The immediate aftermath of Lena's performance and Richard Sr.'s extraordinary announcement transformed the very fabric of Lena's existence, beginning with the most precious person in her life, her mother. With the newly established Lena Sterling Scholarship Fund providing the financial means, Lena ensured her mother received the best possible medical care available. No more worrying about mounting hospital bills, no more compromising on treatment options. Her mother was moved to a renowned private clinic, attended by top specialists, and given every comfort imaginable. The relief that washed over Lena was immense, a balm to the constant worry that had gnawed at her for so long. Slowly, steadily, her mother's health began to improve. The color returned to her cheeks, her cough softened, and her eyes, once clouded with pain and fatigue, now shone with a renewed light, reflecting not just her improving health, but the overwhelming pride she felt for her daughter. Lena would visit every day, reading to her, sharing stories of her unexpected good fortune, and watching with profound gratitude as her mother, whose indomitable spirit had always been her anchor, finally began to recover fully, free from the crushing weight of illness and financial despair. Her dream of providing comfort and security for her mother had not just been realized, it had been exceeded beyond her wildest imaginings. With her mother on the path to recovery, Lena could finally turn her full attention to her own burgeoning future. Richard Sr. swiftly made good on his promise. Within weeks, Lena was enrolled in one of the most prestigious music conservatories in the country, a place she had only ever dared to dream about. The transition was exhilarating and daunting all at once. She was surrounded by immensely talented peers and world-class instructors, all pushing the boundaries of musical expression. Lena thrived in this environment. Her raw talent, honed by adversity and fueled by an unyielding passion, blossomed under expert guidance. She devoured every lesson, every masterclass, practicing with the same diligent intensity that had carried her through the difficult days, but now with a profound sense of gratitude and purpose. Her music, once a desperate plea for recognition and survival, now flowed with a rich tapestry of emotions: joy, hope, gratitude, and a steadfast determination to honor the opportunities she had been given. She learned new techniques, explored diverse repertoires, and discovered nuances in her own artistry she never knew existed. The grand piano in the Sterling mansion had unlocked not just a scholarship, but an entire universe of musical understanding. The sterile halls of the conservatory felt like a second home, a sanctuary where her music could finally soar, unburdened by everyday anxieties. Meanwhile, a subtle yet significant shift began to occur in Richard Jr. The public humiliation, meticulously delivered by his own father, coupled with Lena's undeniably breathtaking performance, had left an indelible mark. He couldn't shake the image of Lena at the piano, her fingers dancing with such profound emotion, nor could he forget the collective awe that had enveloped his usually cynical guests. His arrogance, once an impenetrable shield, now had cracks. He found himself replaying the performance, the Chopin etude echoing in his memory, forcing him to confront the superficiality of his own life and values. It wasn't an overnight transformation, nor was it a complete metamorphosis of character. He was still, at heart, a Sterling, accustomed to privilege. However, the experience had introduced a crucial element into his worldview: empathy, however nascent. He began to explore ventures beyond his usual lavish parties, perhaps investing in local arts initiatives, quietly sponsoring promising young artists, or even just attending classical concerts. He still possessed a certain aloofness, but his sneer was less frequent, replaced occasionally by a thoughtful expression. He was, slowly but surely, learning the value of merit, of passion, and of the profound impact one individual's talent could have, regardless of their background. The sting of his father's reprimand, tempered by the sheer brilliance of Lena's music, was slowly teaching him a humility he never knew he needed. Mrs. Sterling, too, found herself profoundly affected by Lena's triumph. Watching Lena play had rekindled a forgotten spark within her, a ghost of her own artistic aspirations. She had once harbored a deep love for the arts, particularly music, but the demands of her social standing and the expectations of her husband's family had slowly extinguished that flame. Lena's performance was like a fresh gust of wind, fanning the embers back to life. Mrs. Sterling began to re-engage with the cultural scene, not just as a passive attendee, but as an active participant. She became a dedicated patron of the arts, lending her considerable influence and resources to support young, emerging talents. She sought out programs that mirrored the Lena Sterling Scholarship Fund, finding a renewed purpose in nurturing artistic potential. She served on conservatory boards, hosted fundraising galas for struggling artists, and even began taking piano lessons again herself, finding solace and joy in the melodies she once adored. Her interactions became warmer, more genuine, as she rediscovered a part of herself she thought had been lost forever, inspired by the young woman who had dared to dream bigger than her circumstances. The Lena Sterling Scholarship Fund, born from a moment of arrogant challenge and transformed by a display of pure artistry, quickly became a shining beacon of hope for countless aspiring musicians. It was more than just a financial aid program. It was a testament to the idea that talent should never be stifled by poverty or lack of opportunity. Its advertisements graced music schools and community centers, reaching out to those who, like Lena, possessed immense gifts but lacked the means to cultivate them. Each year, passionate young artists from diverse backgrounds applied for the scholarship, their stories echoing Lena's own struggle and ambition. The fund ensured that no one else would have to gamble their passion on a thoughtless bet or face the crushing reality of an unfulfilled dream due to circumstances beyond their control. It stood as a permanent reminder, etched into the legacy of the Sterling family, that true worth was measured not by inherited wealth, but by the power of one's spirit and the beauty one could bring into the world, an enduring monument to Lena's courage and the transformative power of art. Years melted into a decade, and the name Lena, once whispered in the grand halls of the Sterling mansion with a mixture of pity and condescension, now echoed in the most prestigious concert halls across the globe. She was no longer simply Lena, the maid's daughter, but Lena Petrova, the celebrated virtuoso pianist whose performances were lauded for their breathtaking technicality and profound emotional depth. From the hallowed stages of Carnegie Hall to the historic opera houses of Vienna and the modern architectural marvels of Tokyo, Lena's music captivated audiences, drawing them into a world where every note carried the weight of her journey. She never forgot the taste of struggle, the chill of her mother's illness, or the deafening silence that had once filled the Sterling salon before her first triumphant chord. These memories, far from being burdens, fueled her artistry, imbuing her interpretations with a raw authenticity that resonated deeply with listeners. Each performance was a testament to the power of resilience, a silent acknowledgement of the path she had walked. Her path had been meticulously carved, every milestone a testament to the unwavering support of the Sterling Scholarship Fund and her own indefatigable spirit. The conservatory had been a revelation, a sanctuary where her talent blossomed under the guidance of world-renowned instructors. She absorbed knowledge like a sponge, refining her technique, exploring new repertoires, and delving into the intricacies of musical theory. But even amidst this academic rigor, her heart remained tethered to the emotional core of her music, to the stories she wanted to tell through her fingertips. She still found herself on occasion, playing the same Chopin etude that had changed her life, now with an added layer of joy and confidence, a poignant remembrance of the moment her world shifted. It was a private ritual, a way to stay grounded, to recall the fire that had ignited her destiny. In a recent televised interview from her dressing room before a sold-out performance, Lena spoke candidly, her voice calm and reflective, yet brimming with an inner strength. "My success isn't just about talent," she explained, her gaze steady. "It's about the journey. It's about every setback, every sleepless night spent practicing on a broken piano, every moment of fear for my mother's health. That challenging journey forged my resilience, taught me the true value of every opportunity." She attributed her unwavering spirit to the lessons learned in adversity, the understanding that true artistry emerged not just from skill, but from soul. Her words resonated with millions, a poignant reminder that greatness often comes wrapped in struggle. "Music," she continued, her voice gaining a passionate edge, "has this incredible power. It can bridge divides. It can articulate emotions words never could. And for me, it offered hope when there was none, an escape, and eventually, a way to create a better life. Not just for myself, but for my mother, and through the scholarship fund, for countless others. She emphasized the profound impact of that fateful night, transforming a moment of potential humiliation into a catalyst for positive change. The interviewer, visibly moved, pressed her further about the Sterling family's role. Lena smiled softly. "The Sterling Scholarship Fund remains a beacon," she stated, "a living testament to the unexpected kindness that can emerge from the most unlikely places. It ensures that talent, no matter where it originates, is never stifled by circumstance." She often served as an honorary board member, personally mentoring young recipients, sharing her wisdom and experience, instilling in them the same belief in their dreams that had carried her through. The Sterlings themselves, particularly Richard Sr. and Mrs. Sterling, remained quiet benefactors, watching Lena's career with immense pride. Richard Sterling Jr., too, had undergone a subtle but significant transformation over the years. His initial public embarrassment had been a bitter pill, but the indelible impression of Lena's performance, coupled with his father's steady hand, had chipped away at his ingrained arrogance. He diversified his investments, surprisingly finding purpose in supporting local arts initiatives, slowly learning the profound lesson that true value extended far beyond mere material wealth. He had, in his own way, come to appreciate merit over birthright, dignity over disdain. The tale of Lena Petrova, the maid's daughter who played Chopin for $1 million, became a modern legend, a powerful narrative about dignity, perseverance, and the transformative alchemy of music. It taught that true wealth lay not in opulent possessions, but in the richness of one's character, the integrity of one's spirit, and the kindness extended to others. It was a story that echoed the timeless truth that talent, when nurtured with passion and resilience, could humble arrogance, inspire profound change, and illuminate the path to a future brighter than one could ever imagine. The unexpected journey Lena embarked upon had not only secured her own destiny, but had planted seeds of hope for generations to come, a lasting symphony of compassion and opportunity. As the interview concluded, a final shot lingered on Lena, seated at a magnificent grand piano, her fingers dancing across the keys. She began to play, and the familiar, hauntingly beautiful notes of the Chopin etude filled the air. But this time, it was more than just a performance. It was a celebration. Her eyes, shining with an unyielding joy and unwavering confidence, reflected a life lived fully, a dream realized against all odds. The music swelled, a powerful, evocative melody that spoke of overcoming, of triumph, and of the enduring magic woven by a soul unafraid to play its truth. The screen faded to black, but the music, now a gentle, lingering echo, remained, a promise of infinite possibilities.